Have you ever sat down at the piano, practiced something over and over, and still felt like nothing is sticking? This might hit a little close to home because after a while it stops feeling like a practice problem and it starts feeling like you. Like maybe you're just not musical or you're someone who simply doesn't get it the way other people seem to. I want to stop you right there because after more than 30 years of teaching adult piano students, I can tell you with confidence that story is almost never true. What you're experiencing has a name, and it's called cognitive friction. And once you understand what it actually is, you'll realize something important. You were never the problem. Let me explain what I mean by that. Cognitive friction is what happens when your brain is trying to process something in a way it hasn't yet learned to do efficiently. And it feels very specific. Things don't flow, they don't connect. Nothing feels automatic. Instead, everything feels slow, effortful, fragile, like you're holding the whole thing together with the concentration alone, and the moment your attention slips, it all falls apart. Here's exactly how that shows up at the piano. You look at a note on the page, you figure out what it is, you translate it. Okay, that's a G, and then you find it on the keyboard and play it. Then you move to the next note and do the whole thing again. Now that process works at first. You can get through a piece that way, but it never turns into fluency because what you're doing is translating, not reading. And translation, by definition, requires a conscious stop between the symbol and the response. Neuroscience has a term for this state. It's sometimes called cognitive load, and what I'm describing as cognitive friction is what happens when that load exceeds what the brain can handle smoothly. Multiple required skills are all competing for the same limited attention. And instead of one integrated flowing system, the brain is running several separate processes, none of which are automatic yet. Think about what it felt like the first time you drove a car. You were consciously thinking about the steering wheel, the brake pedal, the mirrors, the gas, checking your blind spot, signaling, all of it, all at once, demanding your full attention. It was exhausting, and it probably felt like too much. That's exactly where a lot of adult piano students are living every single time they sit down to practice. Here's what most people, and honestly a lot of teachers, misunderstand what's actually happening. They assume that sight reading is one skill. It isn't. It's at least 6 skills happening simultaneously. When you sit down to read music in real time, your brain is trying to coordinate pitch recognition. That's identifying the notes on the staff. Rhythmic tracking, knowing not just what to play, but when to play it. Interval reading, understanding the relationship and distance between the notes, and not just their individual names. Keyboard mapping, that's translating what's on the page to where your hands need to be. Then there's hand coordination, 2 hands often doing completely different things at the same time. And visual anticipation, reading ahead of where you're actually playing so you're never caught off guard by what's coming. 6 processes running at the same time. Now think about what happens if even one of those isn't automatic yet. The brain has to stop and consciously work through it, and the moment it does, the entire system slows down. The other processes either stall out or start making errors to compensate. That is cognitive friction. Not a character flaw, not a talent gap, a processing problem with a very specific cause. And here's why this matters. If you don't know which of those 6 processes is the weak link, you'll keep practicing the whole piece, which means you're really drilling the same friction over and over rather than targeting what actually needs work. This is exactly what I look at when I do a reading assessment with a student. We go through their playing specifically and identify which of these processes has gaps, which ones are solid, and which ones still are demanding conscious attention. If you'd like to do that together, you can schedule a time with me using the link down below. because once you can see precisely where the friction is happening, things start to move much faster. So what's the solution? It's not practicing harder. It's not playing through the piece more times. That's the approach that got you into this loop in the first place. The way out is making each process automatic, one layer at a time. Go back to the driving analogy for a moment. You didn't learn to drive by doing everything at once from day one and just hoping it would all eventually blend together. You learned to steer, then brake, check your mirrors. Each skill got enough attention to become reliable on its own before it was folded into the whole. And at some point, without you even quite noticing when it happened, those separate things fused. Now when you drive, you're not thinking about any of them individually. They've compressed into one automatic skill. You're just driving. That's exactly what fluency in music reading looks like, and it develops in the same way. When pitch recognition becomes instant, it stops consuming attention, which frees up mental bandwidth for rhythm. When rhythm stabilizes, you can start focusing on intervals. When intervals become familiar, patterns start to emerge, and patterns are where everything happens, because once the brain starts recognizing musical patterns, familiar shapes, sequences, it's seen enough times that it just knows them. You're no longer reading note by note. You're reading in phrases, in chunks, the same way you read English right now, without sounding out every individual letter. That's when playing stops feeling like managing a list of tasks and starts feeling like speaking a language. That's when the friction dissolves. And none of that requires more talent than you already have. What it does require is building the right foundations in the right order and giving each one enough repetition to become automatic before you layer the next one on top. That's it. That's the whole system.